All right. All right, let's get rolling. All right, let's get rolling. Welcome to this month's Q&A, this live Q&A talking about real estate investing. You got any questions? I'm happy to answer them. If you are on the call, I'll prioritize the questions that we have on the call for people that are actually here on the Zoom call with me. I'm putting them in the chat there. So if you want to get on the Zoom call, you can go to our free community. It's called Rentals2Wealth, rentals, the number two, and wealth at school.com. In fact, I'll put that in the chat. Join that group and then go to the calendar, and it's got the link right there. Boom. In fact, I will put that in the chat so that you guys have that. And then we will go through any questions. We have people that have submitted questions ahead of time. So if you got a question that you want to get answered and maybe you can't be on the call because you got a job and they're not cool, they're not going to give you any flexibility, then you can put them at blakeschwanet.com/ask, blakeschwanet.com/ask. That's Blake, CHOISNET.com/ask. So we will go through and answer some of these questions. So if you got questions, feel free to send them over. I'll go ahead and start with some of the ones that we have that have been submitted ahead of time. All right, let's see. One, I can't. I guess there wasn't any name with this one, but the question was: having lots of property sounds stressful. How do you manage the stress? Well, there's a few ways to manage the stress. I'll answer it practically, and then I'll answer it from a personal standpoint. The practical component is you want to replace yourself. You don't want to do all the stuff. You don't want to be doing everything yourself. You want to be able to delegate things. As a leader, as a business leader, you've got to learn what your sweet spot is and what your sweet spot isn't. And so be good, really, really good at your highest and best uses of your time. For a real estate investor, those things are two things: raising money, finding deals. So making offers and raising money for those deals. So if it's not that, you don't want to focus on it. So that's the first thing: is how do you manage all the stress? You don't do everything. You hand it off to a property manager. You hand it off to a contractor. You shouldn't be installing drywall. You shouldn't be taping and bedding. You shouldn't be doing plumbing and electrical. You need to hand that off to somebody else. So that's one. That's the most practical direction on how to manage the stress. Is just don't give yourself that stress. Just avoid it. Avoid that entire stressful experience. So that's the first piece. The other question is, or the other component of this is practical. When you say, how do you manage all the stress? My first question would be, well, what's stressful to you? Like, what seems stressful to you? Is it keeping up with all the properties? Is it managing the tenants? Is it placing the tenants? Is it vacancy? Is it the amount of debt that you're incurring? Is it what's stressful to you? Because if it's the amount of debt that you're incurring, then you can take a strategy that is paying down that debt so that you can have a free and clear property. A lot of people have different opinions on how to scale a portfolio, from being hyper maximized on leverage, hyper leveraged, and being the 80, 90, 100% leveraged so that they can use all their equity to scale their portfolio over time. And then others want to pay it off just so they don't have the debt looming over them. What I would say is, depending on what that stress is, or that concern, that fear, first I would ask you, is it real? Because oftentimes your brain just makes these things bigger than they actually are, and they're not actually that scary. So, I mean, your brain is not designed to make you happy. Your brain's not designed to make you happy. It's designed to help you survive. That's why you don't give a black bear a big hug whenever you see one. So make sure that the fear is real. Now, as far as practical considerations for things that you can actually control, because you can't control the results of your properties, you can only control yourself and your own personal regulation. High performance starts with five things, five very basic practical things. Those things are food, water, sun, movement, and rest. So if you find yourself hyper anxious, hyper stressed, hyper whatever it might be, ask yourself, have I eaten recently? And what's the quality of my food? All right, is it actually clean food, or is it Burger King? Water. Have I drank water? Am I drinking water consistently so that my body can actually function as a machine? Have I gotten outside? Have I actually let the sun hit my skin and let the actual natural sunlight come into my eyes? A lot of you guys are working in cubicles, wearing white collars, and there's not a whole lot of natural sunlight. So when you take a break, you need to take a break and go walk outside, at least just go sit on the bench. If you got to pretend like you're smoking so you can have a smoke break, you need to do that. Food, water, sun, movement, you've got to be moving. Meaningful movement, not just walking from the couch to the fridge. Not like go on a run, go on a walk, go whatever it is for you, work in the yard, meaningful movement so that your body can actually create energy. When you're tired, sometimes you need rest. Most of the time, you can create that energy by going and actually moving. Go and work out, lift some heavy things, or heck, you just go on a run, whatever it is. And then the last one's rest. You need to be sleeping reasonably well. 6 to 8 hours a night is different for everybody. I like my sleep, and I'm really good at it. So that's the most practical component of the stress component. Now, what I will say is, when you ask, how do you manage? I think this question is positioned really well because it's how do you manage the stress? Instead of asking, why do you do that? I don't want to have that stress. Because the reality is that successful people that are successful, have learned how to adapt to stress. They have a higher pain tolerance when it comes to stress. And the only way to get better at that is to expose yourself to it in reasonable quantities. Saying the same thing, like what's the example, the parable of the guy praying that God will give him patience, and instead he just gives them really hard, inconvenient things, right? So they can actually learn patience. That's the exact same situation with stress. The way that you learn how to manage stress is you experience stress and you press through it. All right. People that have 5, 6 kids, with their first kid, they were wondering, how are we going to do this? Their third kid, how are we going to do this? And someone might ask them, how do you manage the stress of 5 or 6 kids? You figure it out. Right. So that's what I'd say there is you have to decide what life you want, and then you got to go create it. And the creating of the life that you want is going to include some amount of stress because you're going to be learning a new skill, and that's decidedly uncomfortable. Just by its nature, it's uncomfortable. So that's what I would say there on how do you manage the stress of having lots of properties. All right, the next question is Monique Joe. And again, if you're on the call, feel free to send over any questions in the chat, and I'm happy to answer them. All right, Monique's question is, I'm in the process of purchasing my first multifamily unit. Was told that because I'm married, my husband may still have to be on the loan. I'm trying to purchase hack, or I guess probably means house hack, by having him purchase a multifamily unit after me as well, which will be his first property as well. Then third, have my father purchase a multi-unit with his VA loan. The goal is to put all properties under a trust. Is that a good idea? Then repeat that the next year. Supposed to live in one unit for years if possible. That I act like I live in one unit and put my mother-in-law in one, then my sister-in-law. Okay. So this is a question about house hacking. For those that don't know, the house hacking process, I'll explain it in just a minute, but it's based on this fundamental. When you buy a house that you're going to live in as a primary residence, you get some conveniences. So when you're buying a rental that's turnkey, typically you need to put 20% down, right? When you're buying a primary residence, you can put as little as 3% down. Or if, in this case, if you got a VA loan, no money down. And that makes it a lot more convenient to buy a house rather than having to put 20% down. So if you're buying a $200,000 house, you could show up with $6,000 and buy that $200,000 house if you're going to live in the house. So what Monique is asking is, first, how can I do that scalably? And then second, the mechanics of it, can I just put my name on it? Can I put my husband's name, or does my husband's name have to be on it? So Monique, for your situation, you do not have to have your husband's name on the title. Now, if you're married, most states are common law state, or common property states, so it's 50% his no matter what. But his name does not have to be on the title. And if this is your goal, his name probably shouldn't be on the title. If you're talking to a lender that says his name does have to be on the title, it's likely not because of a purchase mechanism. It's because of your DTI, or your debt to income. So your debt on a monthly basis is too high over your income. They're not going to let you, for a loan like this, they're not going to let you have. You're not allowed to have over 50% debt to income. So if you're making $5,000 a month, you can't have more than $2,500 a month going out the door in debt obligations. So this isn't groceries and gas and stuff like that. This is debt obligations, credit cards, retail, rent, mortgage, whatever. And this includes this new payment. So that being said, the only way to remedy that is to increase your income or decrease your debt. If you increase your income, the only way to do that in the very, very narrow short term is add your husband to the deal. All right, add him to the title, but he does not have to be. So what I will say is, some lenders are just going to say you can't do that, or you have to do it this way. The reality is, each lender has their own opinion. They've got their own process. If you go to a lender, they say you can't do that. We've talked about this before, but it's kind of like going to a burger shop and asking them for a taco, and they say you can't do that. That doesn't mean tacos don't exist. It doesn't mean Taco Bell doesn't exist. You went the wrong place. So with lenders, usually when someone comes to me and says, "Hey, my lender says I can't do this," or I've talked to all these lenders and I'm stuck. Usually they haven't talked to enough lenders. I'll say, how many lenders you talk to? 3, 4. You got to call more lenders. So you just got to talk to a lot more lenders. And honestly, just use ChatGPT. Just go into ChatGPT and say, hey, find me a bunch of lenders that do this. Be really specific with it. You're a loan broker. All right. The prompt is everything with AI. You're a mortgage broker for investment properties. I want you to go find me 20 mortgage broker or mortgage lenders that will lend on this property. Give them the specs of the property, the purchase price, the amount down, or what your strategy is on it, and it'll bring up a bunch of them. And then you can just go, you can go call them, or better yet, I recommend emailing them. Email them, put all of their emails in the BCC column, and then in the subject line, put quote request because it gets their attention. And in the body of the email, tell them what you want. Say, I'm buying this property. Here's the specs of it. Here's the address. Here's the beds, baths, square footage, tax, insurance, all of that stuff, entity you're going to put it under. And then tell them what you want. I would like a quote for a fix and flip product, or send me over a quote for a 30-year long AM product. That way, you don't waste 20 minutes talking to every single one of them. Just send it over in an email. It'll simplify your life so much. So that's the first component. He does not have to be on the loan. The second is the mechanics of scaling house hacking. House hacking is harder to scale because you can only get one loan every 12 months for something like this. And you're expected to live in the property. That's the assumption and the expectation. So if you were to buy a property and not live in it, that would be mortgage fraud. So that would constitute mortgage fraud. So I would not recommend this. It's mortgage fraud is not something that mortgage companies or the SEC consider or looks on friendly. So what I would say is, if you want to do this, what you need to do is buy a property and you move into it. Your father buy a property, him move into it. Your mother-in-law buy a property, move into it. Or if they're going to buy it and move into it, then they can sell it to you right away, or they can do a lease option or something like that. You can do some creative contract work to where they can get the loan and then you get the property and they don't come out of pocket anything. You essentially just use their lendability, right? Doing this with your husband is a little bit more tricky because you would have to have at least the full intention of living in that property for a year, at least a year. So when I say full intention, what I mean is, let's say you buy a property, you move in, and the next day your boss says, hey, we're transferring you to Dubai. In that case, you're not going to live in that property, but you had the full intent, as opposed to, well, we're going to buy this property, but not move into it and just kind of use the mortgage process or like some of these flexibilities to make this happen. That's mortgage fraud. So you would rather have a smaller portfolio and get to enjoy that portfolio rather than a bigger portfolio that gets confiscated and taken through the legal process while you're in jail. So don't do that. So that's the mechanics of the lending process for house hacking. Hopefully that helps. I know if you get caught by a lender, I'd say this can become a problem. I just need good advice. Yes, if you get caught by a lender or anybody else in a legal role, you are in trouble, and it's not just money. You're probably going to jail. So I would not recommend it. So that's the house hacking question. All right. The next is Stan's question. Who do you use to refinance into a DSCR loan when you're using private money lender to make the initial purchase and renovations, but don't want to wait for a seasoning period if you're only doing a rate and term refi rather than the cash out? Okay. So this question is essentially he's basically asking, what's the best DSCR lender if I don't want a seasoning period? I don't use one specific DSCR lender. I don't have like one lender I go to all the time. And the reason for that is competition is friendly, or competition is a really good thing. That's one of the beauties about free market capitalism is competition drives the price down. So the prices of good or service is just the balance of supply and demand. More demand with less supply, the price goes up. So the way that I approach this is I bid them all out. So I take all of the lenders in my lender vault and I copy all the emails. I put them in the email in the subject line, exactly like I mentioned earlier. I put the emails in the BCC, subject line, quote request, and then tell them what you want and shop that out. And I would send that. I mean, I think in our lender vault, we got 80, 100 lenders in there. And some of them are going to come back. Some of them aren't even going to respond, but some of them are going to come back and their rates are going to be terrible. Some are going to come back and their rates are fine. And then there's going to be maybe 5 or 6 of them that come back and their rates are really competitive. At that point, you let them fight over you. You let them fight over you like you're the pretty girl at the school dance. So all you got to do is take the best loan, and then let's say 6 of them respond that are competitive, and you email the other 5 and you say, "Hey, I've got a 7% interest rate over here. Can you beat that?" Then they go to work. These loan originator is a fancy term for salesperson. They're in sales. They get paid commission. They get paid based on how many loans they originate and they close. So they want this deal. And their initial quote will never be their best. It will never be their best. I've had an owner of a brokerage tell me, I cannot quote you the best quote initially, but once you let me compete, the gloves come off. I can go as low. I can eliminate fees. I can do whatever I want. I can lose money on this thing, right, just to get the business. But I cannot give you my first quote as the best quote that I have. All right. So I don't know if that's internal or regulatory restrictions, but that's just what it is. So make them compete. You can save thousands of dollars at closing and hundreds of dollars a month just by making them compete. So the way that I'd make them compete is I would email the other 5 and say, "Hey, what's your best that you can do?" They'll send something over. And then you send it back to the first guy and say, "Hey, I've got a 6.75 over here. What can you do?" And they might come back. I would do that probably 2 or 3 times. You don't want to do it 10 or 15 times because then they know you're just kind of yanking their chain and you're wasting their time. So if there's a clear winner, you can just send it over to the other 5. Now, sometimes on quotes, you're comparing kind of apples to oranges and you want to make them like. So there's 2 main things that you'll use in the negotiation process for lending and allowing them to, fight over you for your business. One is the rate and 2 is the fees, what you've got to bring to close. So would you rather a 6% rate or $3,000 in closing fees? Well, it really depends on how much you're going to end up paying, right? If you've got a 6% rate, but it's also accompanied by $15,000 in closing fees versus a 12% rate and it's only $3,000 in closing fees, you got to determine what's best for you. And what that will come down to is your monthly payment. Now, the lender doesn't care about your monthly payment. The only thing they can control is the rate and the fees. So make them fight over that. So if you have a mixed bag of loans and the best rate is 7.25, but it comes with $9,000 of fees, don't tell the others it comes with a bunch of fees. Just say, "Hey, I got a 7.25 over here. Can you beat that?" As opposed to if you got one that has, maybe it's a 7.5% interest rate, but it's got $3,000 in fees. So closing costs are really low. I'd send that over to the others. And I'd say, "Hey, your rates competitive. I've got a number of rates that are at the same of where you're at, but I've got closing fees closer to $3,000. What can you do to help me here?" All right. That allows you to save some money. So that's what I'd say on a DSCR loan. Also, when you're sending this out, if you want no seasoning period, just request that and then store this in your own lender vault with a low seasoning period. I know Kiavi's got a product that's 3 months seasoning. There are lots of DSCR lenders out there that'll do no seasoning. And what I'd say to this is the more restrictive you get on your loans and the loans that you're looking for, the more you got to go hunt. So AI is a great friend here. Use AI to be able to hunt for you. But if you're only calling 5 lenders, you're probably not going to find somebody that's going to do, a low loan amount and no seasoning. So that's what I'd say on that front is email a bunch of them, ask them exactly what you want, and give them the constraints like no seasoning or your minimum loan amount or any details about the property, and then let them come back and let them fight. So Stan, hopefully that helps you. Another question, you focus on C neighborhoods, Section 8, stay away. Want to stay away from areas that give squatters rights over landlords. Okay. Squatters' rights over landlords has less to do with C neighborhoods or Section 8 than it does with the state legislation. The best way to stay away from areas that give squatters' rights is to not invest in that state. So California, don't buy. New York, don't buy. If a state is friendly on the squatters' rights thing, do not buy there. Because I saw a deal a couple months ago where someone in California had squatters in their property for 2 years. They couldn't kick them out. But turns out the mortgage company still wants to be paid. So they're just bleeding money. And so that legislation is prohibitive for investing. So that's the first thing, is pick a good state. The best way to do that, if you're looking at investing in a state, just do a quick Google search for worst states to invest in for real estate. And you'll find 5 to 10 different lists of states that are not friendly to landlords. If that state is on any one of those lists, do not invest there. Just don't invest there. Now, if you want to get a little bit more granular, or maybe the numbers make a lot of sense, I would look at what are the legislative conditions in that state that make it not favorable. Because sometimes the lack of favorability can be attributed to things you don't really care about. If the squatters' rights situation is it's going to take 6 to 12 months to get somebody out, don't invest there. But if the squatters' rights is 5 days and there's something else that just says it's not favorable for real estate investors, you don't care. For example, if you're a long-term investor and the local legislation at the state level is not friendly to short-term rentals, you don't care. You don't care about short-term rentals. You don't care about storage units. You care about long-term rentals. So that's what I'd say on the selecting of the state. I do focus on C neighborhoods, C plus neighborhoods. For those that aren't familiar with neighborhood conditions or neighborhood ratings, you've got A, B, C, and D. A is beautiful, brand new, built really well. They've got nice landscaping. Somebody's doing their lawn. It's gorgeous. They've got uplighting on their homes and everything. B is usually it's a nice neighborhood. People mow their lawns. There's not any, there's not cars parked in the front yard and stuff like that. They're in good shape, and usually the homes are a little bit older, maybe the 90s. C, the best way to describe C is to describe D. D is a really rundown area characterized by bars on the windows, boards over the windows, dirt front yard, cars parked in the front yard, chain link fences in the front yard, and just distressed properties. Generally, you would say, I don't feel safe getting out of my car to go walk around in this area. All right. You're not going to go on a walk with your spouse in that area. And then C is in between those things. So C and up is what I focus on. But these all come on a teeter-totter, right? A teeter-totter with appreciation and cash flow. If you want appreciation, A and B are great because they have higher appreciation and lower cash flow. A, you're not going to get any cash flow. You're going to be negative, but your appreciation profile is higher. B, you're probably not going to get any cash flow, but appreciation is going to be decent. And then C, you're going to get some cash flow, like you're going to be decent on cash flow and a little bit of appreciation. D, higher cash flow, lower appreciation. So you just got to decide what you want. D class properties are fine. You just got to know it's going to be heavier on maintenance because people are going to treat it harder, and you're not going to have appreciation. So if you're underwriting for a 5, 10, 20-year profile on this property and you're expecting it to appreciate and double in value twice, because that's the average for the United States, you're going to be below average. It'll go up 50%, maybe double over that 20-year period. So that's as far as neighborhoods are concerned, C and above. Ideally, you're finding the worst property in the best neighborhood. All right, find the worst property in that neighborhood, fix it up. Section 8, yes, I do Section 8. I'd say 40% of my properties are Section 8. There's some misconceptions about Section 8. Section 8 can be very valuable. There are some areas of town where Section 8 will pay more than market rent would reasonably provide on the open market. So I'm thinking about a property of mine. It's a 3-bed, 1-bath, 3, 1.5, and it could reasonably get $1,100 on the open market, but HUD will pay, or Section 8 will pay $1,414 a month. Whereas in another area of town, a nicer area of town, HUD will still pay $1,414, but I can rent that thing out for $2,200 a month. So it's just different based on the area. So it can make sense. The detractor to HUD or Section 8 is people saying, well, they're just really bad on the property. They're going to torch the property. Most of the people that have been waiting for Section 8 and HUD vouchers, they've been waiting for 2 years on a list, and they really don't want to lose that. I'm thinking about a family that I know back when I was living in Austin, working with some people in the inner city and doing some mentoring for some younger boys that didn't know their dad. One of those families had a mom, her boyfriend, and four kids living in a single in a basically a one bed, it's almost a studio apartment, but a one bed apartment. And then they got on HUD and they moved into a 4-bed house, right? In the apartment they were paying $800 a month. In the house they were paying $100 a month out of their own pocket. Right? They do not want to lose that. So all that to say, Section 8's a great deal. They are going to be harder on the property. They're not going to be nearly as hard as most people think, but they're going to be harder on the property. So just be prepared for that. All right, next question just says cost segregation. All right. In fact, Wendy sent over a question in the comments. Hey, today's my first time here. Elaborate on using your family members to buy and you buy back from them. How would that work? Now, to go back to this is when I was answering Monique's question about house hacking. This is just trying to find a creative way to scale your portfolio. If her goal was to buy a property and house hack it and use the house hack strategy to scale her portfolio by using the purchasing power of her husband, spouse, mother-in-law, dad, whatever. The primary goal is to keep her out of jail. So that's the first piece, is she doesn't want to do it in a way that will get her put in jail. So one way that you could do this is if your say mother-in-law or someone goes to buy a property and they actually live in the property, but you want to own that property, then you could buy it together and both be on the deed, and then that person would live in it and you would just be an equity investor. All right. You would need to have some type of agreement, something that writes it out. But then you could either, if you just want it for long term, and that person is, say, your grandparent, they could leave it to you in their estate, and that could be part of your agreement. That could be part of the contract. If you want to take it over earlier than that, then you could have essentially a handshake agreement, a gentleman's agreement, to where after they close, you buy it from them on a wrap or on a subject to type of purchase. And you go ahead and just file that. You can go through title. It's just going to cost you another couple $1,000s to record everything, but you can go through and just record everything at the county courthouse, where essentially they hand over the equity for you and you just take over their payments, hand over the ownership of the property to you and you just take over their payments. So that's one way to do it. There's a number of other ways that you could do it depending on what you're trying to optimize for, but that's one way to do it. I also see a question that we've got over here on YouTube. I live in California. I'm new to real estate investing. Live in California, unfortunately, is what Aman says. Based on your experience, what's the best way to get started, given that I would be doing this from California? Aman, that is a great question. You have a benefit and a drawback. The drawback is you live in California, which means that you can't invest where you live. The buzzkill, the bummer here, is that things are just too expensive. They don't cash flow, and the legislation is clinically insane. Now, the benefit that you've got is if you own property in California, you probably bought it for like 50 cents in a candy bar, and it's worth $8 billion now. You can sell a 1-bed, 1-bath for $1.2 million in some areas. So you may have some equity in your home, but let's just assume that you don't even own anything. All right, you just live in California. The solution for you is to find a market that aligns with your goals. So if you want cash flow, you got to find a market that cash flows. You've got to find a market that's actually oriented toward that. So, and this is kind of like if you're, let's say you're young, you're not married, and you're looking for your spouse. Are you more likely to find your spouse sitting at home not doing anything, or are you more likely to find your spouse when you go out with some friends, or you go out to, you play some rec league sports, or you go to the gym or whatever, you go to the bar, you go to a restaurant, whatever? You're more likely if you put yourself in the right situation. So you've got to find a market that aligns with your goals. The people that I work with, they are focused on cash flow. So they want cash flow, some appreciation, and a reasonable price of entry. So what that means for them is they've got to find a market that will cash flow. I'm seeing, just as far as examples, I'm seeing great deals coming out of Akron, Ohio, Birmingham, Alabama, Macon, Georgia, Jackson, Mississippi, some markets like that. Typically, these markets are between 50,000 people and 250,000 people. The median home price is below $200,000. And the relative rent to price ratio for the market is above 0.9%. And when I say relative rent to price ratio, what I mean is rent to price ratio on a property level is our best metric for evaluating, will that property cash flow? So rent, it's exactly what it is. It's just rent divided by price. So the monthly rent divided by the price of the home. So if it's $1,000 a month divided by a $100,000 purchase price, that's a 1%er. So when people say 1% rule or 2% rule, this is what they're talking about. It's the rent to price ratio. So a 1%er is break even and maybe even a little bit negative, just depending on how the economics of the insurance and taxes, and that's really market specific and even sub-market specific. So 1% is just break even. So if it's below that, you're in trouble. You want it to be higher. So what you need to do on this side is if your market rent to price ratio is averaging about 1%, you're not going to take the average properties. You're going to find better properties. So what I found is that number's closer to 0.9. If you take the 3-bed rent, the median 3-bed rent, and the median home price, and you divide those by each other, it needs to be above 0.9. If you're still unsure after that, if it's below 0.8, don't even look at it. It's just not going to cash flow. You might find a deal or two here and there, but you're not going to be able to optimize for that market. So at that point, if you're still unsure, and maybe it's exactly 0.9 on the dot or 0.89, then you can go in and you can look at some economic indicators, and you can go look at real properties on market. If they're on market for rent or for sale, you can go and say, oh, if it's for sale, I know what it's going to cost. Now I just got to go comp it out and see what it's going to rent for. Or if it's for rent, then you got to go comp it out and see what it would sell for. And then you get 30, 50, maybe 100 data points of that. And you know exactly what the market's rent to price ratio is going to be. I call that the bottom up method, using actual data from on market data. So if you do that, your rent to price ratio should be above 1%. Because like I said, that's going to be the average rent to price ratio, and you want it to be better than that. Just straight up, you want it to be better than that. So yeah, that's an answer for you. These are all things that I talk about with my students all the time. So if that's helpful for you, feel free to reach out. We can talk. I'm happy to give you a little bit of direction. All right, Wendy. Okay. Boom. Wendy's follow-up question. Thank you that but wouldn't they still be on the loan? True to do that, but the bank says I can't take over the loan. I can't qualify for the mortgage. Oh, okay. So if you don't qualify for a mortgage, then you won't be able to go through a traditional lending process. If you have a family member that can qualify for it, what they could do is they could buy the property for you and then sell it to you on a wrap, and essentially sell it to you as a seller financed property. So they would have a loan. Let's say their payment is $1,000 a month, all in. And then they would sell it to you, and they'd say, I'll finance this loan for you at $1,000 a month. So you pay $1,000 a month. Even in the contract, you could say exactly what the PITI is on family member, let's call him Bob, on Bob's loan. So that means that you're responsible for that. So that means that you own the property, and you are now paying Bob or your mom or whoever it is. And then Bob is responsible for paying their underlying mortgage. So you could do it that way. That's a wrap. Or a sub 2 would be you would buy it and you would just take over their payments. You would take over their payments, and you would need to get power of attorney and close on a sub 2 purchase. There are some risks here, much smaller than people think, of the due on sale clause being called. But there's multiple ways to do that. So that's what I'd recommend there. Now, it just from a practical and strategic standpoint, if you can't qualify for the mortgage, I'd ask why. It could be that your credit's in bad shape. It could be that you don't have enough cash. It could be that your DTI is bad. It could also just be that you don't have you're not bankable because of the way that you're paid. Maybe you're 1099, you're self-employed, and you don't have 2 years pay stubs or whatever it is. If the reason that you're not qualifying for a mortgage is credit score or your income is too low, whatnot, I think from a strategy standpoint, long-term rentals, I would do that later. I would build up your income first, and I'd focus on maybe wholesaling or or maybe doing a flip or something like that. That would make sense there. All right. Oh, I'm on. Makes sense. Awesome. Yeah. Great question. All right. Let's see. Question. All right. Martha asks, what was your greatest challenge when you got started? I would say my biggest challenge when I got started was probably trying to recreate the wheel. I just didn't know that there were people out there that would teach and mentor. I didn't know anybody in this world. I wasn't like raised around people buying properties. We didn't have much money growing up, so I didn't expect that this was something that I would like to be able to do. I thought it was just for some other people and not for me. It just wasn't in the stars. So I did it on my own. I tried, and my first contractor walked off with 12 grand. And so that was just kind of a gut punch. And but I think for people that are trying to recreate the wheel, what I'd say is you got to find somebody to teach you. You got to find somebody to walk through it with you. You might say, well, I don't know anybody. I don't know how to do that. Well, you can find somebody. So if you want to mentor or someone to teach you, there may be somebody in your life who can help. I ended up finding someone to teach me, a coach. I hired him. His name's Brian Elwood. He now doesn't coach real estate anymore. In fact, he refers anybody over to me. He teaches people how to start online businesses, like coaching programs, kind of like the one that I have. And then he spends the rest of his time with his wife and his two little girls. So, but after I hired him, things just exploded because there were a couple things. One, I could be more prescriptive. It allows me to focus. So instead of me trying to figure out all of the 100 ways that I could make money in real estate and then evaluate which one's best for me, I could have somebody else with all the experience diagnose it and say, do this. Kind of like I just did with Wendy. All right. So that was one thing. The other is it increased my focus because whenever I had a question about, say, the refinance process, let's say that I'm looking to get my first deal and I'm asking about the refinance process. I don't really even need to know the details of that question or the answer to that question. I just need to know there's a solution. So I've got to know that there's an answer whenever I get to that point. And once I develop a confidence in that, then I can do whatever. Right? I'm not concerned about what's down the road. And so that's one thing that in our community is really beneficial, even for new investors. When they see somebody ask a question about, cost segregation or advanced depreciation or the tax strategies or whatever it might be, or leverage or portfolio management, they don't even need to know the answer to that. Right? If you don't have a property, you don't need to find a CPA that's real estate specific. You don't need to find an attorney that's real estate specific. You need to find a property. And so if you know that the answers down the road are going to be answered for you, you're good to go. You can focus more. And so that's what my coaching gave me. Because, at that point, after that, I exploded. I didn't have to worry about what to learn, strategy, learning everything, or how to protect myself, any of that stuff. I was able to move faster. Probably saved me 3 years. And so if you're looking for somebody like that, a mentor or coach, they need to have three things. They need to know exactly what you want to know. So they've got to actually be in the trenches doing it. There's a difference. But if I told you, hey, sign up for my, whatever course, and I'm going to teach you how to get a six pack, and you're like, Blake, you don't have a six pack, right? That's fair. I don't know what it takes to get a six pack. I don't know what it takes to be able to maintain a six pack over, holiday break whenever there's delicious turkey and mashed potatoes and gravy. All right. So you need somebody that's actually done it, not just the philosophical like theory, because in theory, everything's the same, but in application, they're fundamentally different. So that's one thing. They got to know what you want to know. Second, they got to be able to communicate it and teach it. We all know, usually in work, we all know somebody that was excellent as an individual contributor, and then they were promoted to a supervisor just because they were really good at that, and they burnt the house down because they're a terrible leader, they're a terrible communicator. So this is a specific skill. So they need to be able to teach it and communicate it. And then finally, and I think this one's the most difficult, they need to be willing and able to give you their time. Usually people, whenever they've gotten really good at this, they've bought their time back and they can spend it on exactly what they want to spend it on. So they're not going to spend it doing something that doesn't give them a return on their time or their lifestyle. And so if you find somebody like this and they're not willing and able to give you their time, your solution there is to work for them for free. So tell them, I will work for you for free. I'll hunt deals for you for free. You just tell me what to do and I'll do it for free. I will not get paid. I'll do it for free for 6 months. right? And if at any point I'm more of a burden than I am a help, cut me loose. All right. Now you're paying for their education with your time. If you don't have anybody in your life that does this, this is how I function for people. If they're like, I just don't have anybody that can do that or willing and able to give me your time, none of those three qualities, that's how I function for people. If you're interested in learning more about how we work, you can go to 90day rentalroadmap.com/apply. In fact, I'll put that over in the chat, and you can check that out and see if it'd be a good fit. Go look through the webinar, the material there, and some of the case studies and testimonials of people that have been successful. And if it seems like it's a good fit and you can see yourself in those people and their goals and what they're trying to achieve, let's talk and see if I can help. All right. Okay, sweet. All right, Wendy's follow-up. How do I talk to you after? I'm on the title, but not the mortgage. But I think answered the flip, come up with, will I want to get family member off with a sub 4 point interest rate. Co-owner on the title, but I'm not alone. Hey, being on the title and not alone, that's fine. That's a great situation. Awesome. How to talk to you after. Best way to do that's in the community, in the school community. Just post something in the community, and I'll get you an answer, and I'll help make sure that you get a good answer there, Wendy. Awesome, sweet. Anything else over there? Perfect. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to our next question. Boom. All righty. Oh, cost segregation. Joel asked this, and well, I guess he didn't ask, he just stated cost segregation. So what is it and how does it help? I will say right now, if you're a new investor and you're trying to figure out how cost segregation can help you, don't. Just go buy a property. Like, just go do the thing. Don't extra plan. Don't plan the next 10 years, the next 20 years. Just go get your first property. Then go get your next property, because cost segregation is really not going to help you until you've got a handful of properties. So don't worry about the complexities of this or advanced tax strategies or any of that type of stuff. Just go get a property. Go get a property that cash flows, put yourself in that position. And then once you get to the point where you say, man, I need new solutions for these problems I'm experiencing, go get them. But don't create a problem because you have a solution for it. Just go do the thing that will actually solve the problems that you have, which is you want to create the lifestyle that you want. So now, for those of you that are more experienced, or maybe you've got a few properties under your belt and you're asking, what is cost segregation? How can it benefit me? Cost segregation is essentially it's a tax strategy. It's a way that you can offset more of your income, more of your even active income, by using the property that you already have and just calculating things a little bit differently on the tax side. So here's what that means. The way that it would look practically is you have a single family home, all right? And that single family home is depreciated over 27 and a half years. So if it's a $275,000 house, that's $10,000 a year in depreciation. But let's say that you want to accelerate that. You want to accelerate the depreciation on that property. And you want to, instead of taking $10,000, you've got an extra $20,000 of taxable income that you want to offset. One way you can do that is cost segregation. So you would have a cost segregation study performed on your property by a cost segregation specialist. And they would go in and they would look at everything in your property, and they would try and figure out, well, how can we segment these to make it more favorable? Because the depreciation of the property itself, not the land, but the property itself, is 27 and a half years. So you got $10,000 there. But then there are other things within the property that you can depreciate over a faster time frame. For example, is a refrigerator going to last 27 and a half years? No. Is a dishwasher going to last 27 and a half years? No. Is an HVAC unit going to last 27 and a half years? No. So what they do is they go in and they take the discrete components within the house and they apply their own depreciation schedule to those, which allows you to move a lot of the equipment and expenses up into this year. So what they'll do is they'll do that, perform that for you, and then they'll give you an output and say, do you want to go ahead and do the formal study? They'll give you essentially a projection. My recommendation is, if you can't get a 10-to-1 savings, don't do it. 10-to-1 meaning if you spend $1,000 on this cost segregation study for that one property, it should save you $10,000 in taxes, essentially. And if you can't do that, just don't do it. Now, there's also other ways where you can advance some of your depreciation. You can actually push your depreciation up into the first year and do bonus depreciation. That's a little bit different, but it's similar to cost segregation. But again, what I would not recommend someone focusing on advanced tax strategies or cost segregation if you don't have your first door. In fact, if you don't have 3 doors, I wouldn't even think about it. It's just not worth your time. If you find that you have a problem, and that problem is you have too much income that's exposed to taxes, taxable income, then look at cost segregation as a solution, or look at advanced depreciation as a solution, or look at a lot of different options. That's what I'd recommend. So that's my feedback to you, Joel, on cost segregation. Next question, Jerry. Let's see, it looks like we got about 15 minutes left. So if you've got questions, go ahead and send them over in the chat and I'll get you taken care of. Jerry's question is, can't be there today, but when a property does not cash flow well, but has a good percentage of ARV, is flipping a solid option rather than holding? The answer here lies in what these terms mean. So, for example, if you're a long-term investor and you want to buy properties that are, for example, you're using the BRRRR method. So you're using the flip process to create equity in the home and then refinance. There's 2 metrics that you care about. One is cash flow, and the other is, do I get my money back? So is it going to cash flow, and do I get my money back? Because the whole sweet spot of the BRRRR method is you get a cash flowing property for low or no money out of your own pocket. All right, that's the entire goal. So first, you got to get your money back. And second, it's got to cash flow after that. If you get all your money back, but you're losing $500 a month, this is not a good deal. But if you have to leave $100,000 in the deal and you're making $500 a month, that's not a good deal either. You got to have both for a really good BRRRR. So if you've got a property that won't cash flow, let's say it's negative $50 a month or it's flat, but the spread on percentage of ARV is high, that's a great flip. That's a really good flip option. So what that would look like practically is, when I say percentage of ARV, I'm talking about purchase plus rehab and holding costs, all of that lumped together, divided by your future value of the home after you're done fixing it up. If that's 70% or better, 70%, 65, below 70%, golden. That's the 70% rule. So if there's a lot of margin in it, then that's a great situation for a flip. So if that number is at 70, or maybe it's a little bit higher, then that's not a great flip option. And you just want to pass on the property. But if it looks good and there's a lot of margin between the purchase and rehab and what its future value is, but it's not going to cash flow, that's a great option for flip. Now, what I will say to that is, if you're flipping, the evaluation process for flipping and BRRRR is different. It's similar, but it's different. Because for BRRRR, it's not just that you're evaluating the future value of the home and then you refinance into it. It's that the way you evaluate the future value of the home is way more predictable because it's based on previous data, historical data. The appraisal process looks back 3-6 months and looks at that data. The market, the active market, is different. And even today's market is more volatile than historically is normal. So things could go up or things could go down. So you could look at the market and say, well, I expect this from a comps perspective. I expect this to sell for 175. When you go to sell it in 3 months, depending on if it's a 6-month hold, that's even more variability. It could sell for 190. It could sell for 150. You just don't know. I've got a friend who's an investor in my market who's liquidating some of his properties and he's putting them into larger asset classes. He's ran comps. He said, I got to sell it at basically a 10% discount off of what the comps say it's worth. All right, not off of what he bought it for, but off of what the comps say it's worth. So the localization of when you're selling it is a significant factor in what you'll be able to sell it for, which means you got to take that into consideration for your underwriting. So the way to solve that is you got to have an expert in that market. You got to have somebody that understands the market dynamics and has been doing it for a long time. That's an agent. And you want to ask them, in your professional experience, if I sell this in 3 months, what am I going to get for it? How do you see the market fluctuating for properties like this in this area with these specs? And are we going to get what I think it's going to appraise for? Is it going to be more or is it going to be less? And then if they say, yeah, I think we can get that, get an understanding what their confidence level is. So what that would look like practically is, Mr. or Miss Agent, you say you think we can get 175 for it. What number are you like 100% confident on? Or what would your strategy be for listing? You think we list at 180 and then we take anything above 170? Or, how quickly do you think that we'll sell? And that will give you the context that you need to be able to underwrite appropriately. Because if they say, oh, I think we can get 175, but I'm really sure we can get 150, that's a really big gap. As opposed to, I think we can get 175, but yeah, 165 is probably our floor. I'm very confident. I would be floored if we sold at 165. That's a lot smaller gap for you in your deal analysis and your underwriting. So that's what I'd say on that side of things. All right. What kind of property should I buy first? All right, single family, duplex, turnkey, fixer upper. This depends on your goals and your constraints. So if your goals are cash flow, wealth generation, and tax advantages, then that dictates what strategy you should use. Now, if you shouldn't just be investing in bonds or CDs, right? You're beanie babies. You want to invest in something that will give you cash flow and tax advantages and wealth. So that should dictate your direction. But your strategy is also going to be influenced by your constraints. Primarily, this is time and money. So how much time do you have to put toward this? I think 3 to 6 hours a week and get a door every 90 days. At least that's what my students are doing. Then the other is money. How much money do you have to start? And this is how much money do you have to put toward real estate investing? So if you've got $200,000 in your 401k, but you're not putting that toward real estate investing, don't count it. If that number is less than $40,000, I think you should probably be doing the Burr model, maybe some flips. But if you want long-term value and long-term investing, you don't want to be doing flips. That's active income. You got to go hunt again. You want something that's going to continue to churn out and give to you over and over and over. So that's on the strategy side. If you're over $40,000, what I would recommend is start with turnkey, buy a couple turnkeys in a really good cash flow market, then scale to something more scalable like the Burr model. Because with turnkey, you can learn 70% of the Burr process. And then you can focus more discreetly on the last 3 variables, things like the refinance process and appraisal process, managing rehab, and predicting future value of the home. Those things, but everything else is proved out. You got your team built, you got the operations set up, you got the market validated, and you're good to go. Once you get into that, I would say my recommendation is to start with a property that is single family through a fourplex. Start with a single family to a fourplex because it's not a matter of can you do it, are you capable, or good enough? None of that. It's a matter of your risk profile. So an example of this would be, well, should you start with a single family first, or should you start with a 200 unit, $20 million property? Well, if you screw one up, let's call it a $100,000 single family home. Let's say you screw both up 10% because you're new and you don't know what you're doing. Well, a $20 million property, you're bankrupt. You're just 10% of that. You're just screwed, right? There's just no way that you're coming back from that. With a $100,000 property, you screw it up 10%. Nobody wants to lose 10 grand. But at least you can keep living, right? Like you're not completely torched. Then once you get the basics down, you can scale to a duplex. The difference between a duplex and a single family is basically nothing. Difference between a duplex and a quadplex, almost nothing. Difference between a quadplex and an eightplex, not very much. It allows you to scale while taking on a reasonable amount of risk exposure. So it allows you to scale more predictably and protect the assets that you have. So now, if you're, I think about when I was just talking to a friend about our 20s and how I felt a lot of freedom in my 20s to just do a bunch of random crazy stuff because I can chalk it up to being young and dumb. So if you don't have any money and you're like, well, I don't care what bankruptcy, I don't really care about that. Maybe you can take on a little bit more risk. Awesome. I still wouldn't recommend a 200 unit, $20 million apartment facility, but yeah, that's what you want to do. That's up to you. But I would recommend the first property you buy be a single family all the way up to a quadplex. And then from there, scale to do something a little bit bigger. And then what that allows you to do is you build out the requisite skills to be able to take that property down. Because my as tactfully as I can, when someone says, I want to buy a 50 unit or a 200 unit and it's their first property, the way that I ask this is as kindly as I can, what makes you think that you can do that? That's like walking up to a bench press and having never benched and saying, put 600 pounds on that thing. There's no way you don't have the requisite skill. You don't have the needed skills to be able to do that without absolutely torching your entire life. So that's why I say that is start with something that is doable and it's achievable and it has a reasonable amount of risk involved with it. How do I know if a deal is good? Like what's a good number that I should look for to know that the cash flow is good? Here's what I'd say on this, and this will be our last question. We'll go ahead and wrap up after this. When you go into looking at a deal, this should be a math decision. It's not an emotional decision. It's not a feeling decision. It's a math decision. In order to do that, your criteria for success have to be defined before you enter into that room, the deal analysis room. So the criteria for success have to be defined before you run the numbers, so that when you run the numbers will tell you this is either a good deal or it's a bad deal. If it's a good deal, go offer on it. If it's a bad deal, throw it away. The metric for evaluating that is cash on cash return. Cash on cash return answers the question of all the money I'm leaving in this property or I'm putting into it, how much do I get back in the next 12 months? So if you leave $10,000 in a property, is that a good deal or a bad deal? Well, if you make $50 back in the next year, it's a terrible deal. But if you make all $10,000 back, that's 100% cash on cash return. That's a really, really good deal. So somewhere in between is a number that says this is a good deal. If you're buying turnkey properties, these are properties that are on the MLS, they're great. You're going to buy it and just move someone in right away. It doesn't take extra work. A good cash on cash deal fair is 10% or above. So of the money that you're leaving in, you make 10% of it back in the first year. On average, turnkey deals that I see like this, the total return, the aggregate return, including cash, appreciation, tax advantages, debt pay down is about 57%. So your overall return is still wildly better than any other investment mechanism that you can do with this amount of risk protection and predictability. So that's on the turnkey side. If you're doing this for a BRRRR property, I recommend that your cash on cash return should be at least 60%. So what that means is if you leave $10,000 in a deal, you should be making back $6,000 in that first year of bottom line cash flow after all expenses. Usually you're not leaving $10,000 in a BRRRR deal, but that's the metric that I think is reasonable to shoot for. And the question really becomes, well, why that metric or why not something else? Cash on cash return it's a cousin of ROI, and ROI is a way for us to evaluate unlike things and compare them to each other. It takes an apple and an orange and we can compare it. We can compare a Beanie Baby to a real estate investing asset. We can compare an index fund to an old basketball card, because all it is how much money did you put in and how much did you get back for it? So return on investment is the best way to be able to compare that. The reason why we pick these numbers is because I see deals all over the place. Could you take a 2% cash on cash? Yeah, but it's not the best use of your money because there's a lot more deals out there that you could buy for it. Right? You could trade your money and make way more money. And I think 10% is a great threshold for turnkey, and 60% is a perfect threshold for the BRRRR model. So that's what I would say on how to know if a deal is good and what cash on cash you should target. All right, that does it for our May Q&A call. Next month will be a little bit flexible because we got a baby coming here in the next 3-4 weeks. So if baby shows up, I like you guys, but I like my wife a lot more, and we'll be way more flexible with the time. We may end up moving it back a week or something like that, or heck, we might even move it up a week just so that I can, if I know that the baby's probably coming or we're going to get induced or something like that in a week, we might move it up. So, but other than that, thanks for joining this week's coaching call. If you want to connect more with people that are doing this exact same stuff, I always say you can't be what you can't see. And so if you don't see people doing stuff, or you don't see what you want to be being done, you just won't believe that it can be done and you won't do it. So you got to get around people that are doing it. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. And so if you put yourself in a community around other people that are doing what you want to do, whatever it is, doesn't have to be real estate, whatever it is, if you want to be the best basket weaver, underwater basket weaver, you want to spend time around those people. If real estate's a priority for you and you want to be able to connect better with those people, you need to get in community. And so if you're not in the Rentals2Wealth community, join that on School. The link is school.com/Rentals2Wealth. That's rentals, the number 2, and wealth. and join that group so that you can get connected with everybody. If you're interested in learning how to scale your own portfolio, I make real estate investors. That's what I do. And not everybody needs a coach, but for people that want a coach, they want a mentor, and they don't have somebody in their life that can actually do that. That's what I'm exceptional at that. We got people that closed on the first door in 19 days and just absolutely killing it. And Dean's goal was 12 doors in his first 12 months, and he hit that in like 8 months. So if you're interested in that, go to 90dayrentalroadmap.com/apply. That's 90dayrentalroadmap.com/apply. Other than that, we will see you next month. Happy investing, guys.